Hello there, Ben Bowers, the Spirit Specialist, and this is the accompanying video that goes with the Florida Whiskies selection box that I've put together. It doesn't have much of a catchier name than that. I very nearly put Magic KING-DRAMS, and that will probably be the title of the actual video. But this is, I just wanted to do the Florida license plate because I think it looked really good on the front of the box. But this is a selection of whiskies in the box, which you hopefully will have purchased or will purchase, having watched this video, of 6 whiskies that I picked up while I was doing a tour of 10 distilleries across the state of Florida. And when I say across the state of Florida, it was basically Jacksonville to Tampa, St. Petersburg. So it was pretty much the length of the I-4 that goes across. There is a couple of distilleries, and one that I've had conversations with up in the Panhandle, and they were like, oh, come and see us, it's only a 6-hour drive. Yeah, we're British. A 6-hour drive for us that's a long trip, whereas a 6-hour drive for America is like, oh, it's just around the corner. Anywho, the reason for the trip was there is a growing distillery distillation industry that is picking up in Florida. A lot of people that I spoke to before I was going across were like, Florida? Well, it's just oranges and vodka pretty much, is it? And yes, to an extent there is that. But I'm going to put an image up on the screen which shows you what is now called the Florida Distillery Trail. And that map actually includes, or doesn't include, a number of other distilleries. For example, the distillery I've been talking about in the Panhandle, Timber Creek, isn't actually on that map. So that map has, what, 39, 40 distilleries on there, and there's actually slightly more than that. Now, having had some conversations and reading up about Florida distilleries and the kind of growth in the recent years, we're looking at, in the main, in the last couple of years, and that's really because of legislation. It was 2012 when Phil McDaniel, who was the founder of the St. Augustine Distillery, one of which is included in this pack, actually went to the state capital in Tallahassee to lobby for a relaxation of the rules. If you're a brewery, it's very easy to open a brewery, make beer, have a bar, give people drinks at the bar, that sort of thing, because beer is kind of like 5, 6, 7%, that sort of thing. And craft brewing has really grown, particularly in the last Florida, 20, 30 years, but arguably 20, 30, 40 years across the whole of America. With distillation, we have the issue of laws and also preconceptions because it's a very religious country, and it's almost like once you get above 15, 20%, there is this, oh, you know, this is not Satan's drink, but, you know, prohibition was very much kind of based on religion and temperance and everything like that. And there are still laws that just have not been checked or haven't been checked until relatively recently that were prohibiting anybody setting up some kind of distillery. So as I say, when Phil McDaniel went to the state capital to lobby, the result of that meant that if you opened a distillery, you were able to sell 2 bottles to 1 person every year. And that was a change in the law because you couldn't even do that. People might be aware of the fact that Jack Daniel's Distillery in Tennessee is in a dry county. And it was only until relatively recently that you could actually buy a bottle of Jack Daniel's at the distillery where it is made. It was exactly the same position that pretty much the entire state of Florida were in. You weren't able to sell a bottle of the spirit that you made in your distillery. There's also issues with distribution. There is like a 3-tier system within drinks distribution, and it's actually the distributors that seem to have most of the power. There's a big company called Southern Wines and Spirits who pretty much run all the drinks distribution in Florida and the South of America, and they absolutely control everything. If you want that, you're going to take 20 cases of Fireball. If you want that particular branding, you've got to take 40 cases of this. And you've also got to get it at a price, which means that as a retailer, your margins are pretty pathetic. So there's the cost of the distillation and the producer actually making it. There's a big chunk in the middle that's the distributors and the sales teams. And then the retailer has to struggle to kind of get the margin that they want, and in order to sell the products that they want, and the collectible ones and the rare ones, they also have to deal with bulk volumes of stuff that they don't really want. So it's very difficult, and it is getting better. But we are literally looking at last year, around August of last year was when laws were changed so that you were able to offer cocktails. You could have a bar at your distillery and you could offer cocktails using spirits that you actually produced. You could do tastings. You could do tasting events in other retailers that might be selling your products. Now, the distilleries in here, with the exception of St. Augustine, which is probably one of the oldest ones, are still relatively new and they are still growing. And what I'm hoping is that I can bring these across and sell them in the UK and get people aware of what they're doing. There's some really, really exciting things going on. So as you go through the box, what I'm going to do is give you some background information about the distillery. So there'll be, in the show notes, there'll be the timings where you can click straight to the one that you want to try. So I have put it in some kind of running order if you wanted to have all 6 one after the other. But if you want to dip in and out, or you want to try it one first because it's like, oh, that sounds interesting, I'll try that one first, just click on the timings and that will take you straight to the little bit of background information that I'm going to give you about each distillery. I'm not going to do a tasting myself. I want you to find out and hopefully enjoy all of them, because I think these are really, really exciting. So these are 6 that I will be bringing across as brands. There are a couple. So the Manifest is like a single cask bottling, but they do have 100% rye. But if I just run you quickly through the box, I'll give you an idea of what you're actually going to be looking at, and then you can get the background information, a little bit more information about each one as you drink them. So the first one is Old St. Pete's, and this is at the St. Petersburg Distillery, Old St. Pete's Sunshine Whiskey. A couple of years ago, this used to be called Sweet Corn Whiskey, which always kind of threw me because I was like, oh, it's made out of sweet corn. Okay, that's a bit weird, but that's corn. So this is the St. Petersburg Distillery, which is, funnily enough, in St. Petersburg. Now, this is one of the very few distilleries that I visited where I didn't actually get to meet any of the owners or founders or anything like that. So here's a picture of the distillery, and you'll see that a bit later on in the background info. That picture was taken by me. But it's arguably the biggest in terms of volume and size, and it is rapidly expanding. We then go to Sugarworks, which is the Callalisa Creek Premium Craft Whiskey. That is what the bottle looks like. Here is a picture of me and Tom McPeak, who is the founder. Really, really lovely guy. Very analytical, quite scientific. Started showing me like the corn that they were using, was really going like harping on about Cherokee blue corn. Incredibly passionate about the ingredients because he has this background in agriculture. And I will be bringing across the Callalisa Creek, if you enjoy this, the Shark Bite Cinnamon Whiskey. He also gave me some sample that they've currently got in cask of a couple of whiskies that they had, and there was a 90% rye that absolutely blew my socks off. When that is ready, I am hoping to also bring that across as well. Oh, and by the way, this is not necessarily going to be exclusive to me. What I'm also going to do is make this available to wholesalers, other retailers, that sort of thing. Obviously, it would be great if you could buy it from me directly, but this is a little bit of a diversion for me going from retail into distribution. I'm really excited about Florida spirits generally and where they are as in terms of their position in the world market, the American whiskey market, the American spirits market. I think there's a really, really good opportunity for people to find out about these. I'm really excited about what they're doing. They actually say they're kind of where craft brewing was 20 years ago. So it's still very early days. They're still kind of finding their feet, but it means that they're being a little bit more experimental. And actually that leads me quite on nicely to Dark Door. So this is Dark Door Spirits, Spirit of the Harvest. A really experimental distillery, playing around with just even what you put in the still, let alone maturation. They have one of those vacuum aging tanks that they're not afraid to use and play around with and experiment with. And it's kind of like they started off using it just to kind of get consistency. Then they're looking at, in terms of, well, what can we do with a flavor profile depending on how we operate this system that we've got. They also have casks maturing and everything like that. And bear in mind, this is Florida. This is a really hot, humid climate for quite a long time of the year. So their maturation in cask is kind of tricky. You know, they can't really get past 2 or 3 years without losing far too much stock. But you've got increased interaction with the wood. So you've got all sorts of interesting things going on in terms of that maturation. People will say it's maturing faster, blah, 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 all that sort of thing. But there is a lot more going on between spirit and wood because of the climate that they've got compared to the rest of America, let alone the rest of the world. So the next one, St. Augustine, which I've had a soft spot for years. I first came across one of these about 5-6 years ago. They've never changed the bottle. It's absolutely gorgeous. It looks even better when it's full. This is their port finished bourbon. They also have a Florida straight bourbon, which is basically then that's the port. They finish that in port casks, and you'll find out where those port casks come from, which is very interesting. I love those two. I'm going to try and bring both of those across. Here's a picture of me with Will Hensler, who is their, I think he was their sales director, showed me round. Really, really nice guy. Currently in conversations with him. Then we come to Kazuba & Sons. So this is the bottle for what you've got in the pack, which is the high wheat rye 7-year-old cash strength. They do have I think it's 45% I'll probably be bringing across. But the cash strength I thought was absolutely stunning. Here is a picture of me with Matt, who is one of the two & Sons, who is a Kazuba himself. They also have, and you'll see this in the background info, a really, really interesting style of whiskey that's called Starkus. Watch that because it fascinated me and it tasted absolutely brilliant and the price point is really good. And then finally we have Manifest. So Manifest, gorgeous bottle, really, really, really nice kind of packaging, that sort of thing. This is, and you'll see that on there, this is their Zinfandel finished single cask rye, which I thought was absolutely stunning. They had a sweet vermouth and a Calvados finish as well, but the Zinfandel blew me away. It's not something that I can bring across because they don't have that much of it, but hopefully it will give you an indication of the quality of the spirit that they're making. The 100% rye is excellent. They do a really good bourbon stroke rye, so it's a blend of a bourbon whiskey and their own rye, which is also fantastic. That I will be bringing across. Here's a picture of me with David Cohen. David is one of the 4 founders of Manifest. David is also the founder of the Florida Craft Spirits Association. He was the first person I met. So they're up in Jacksonville. Long drive from Orlando up to Jacksonville, mainly because of the traffic, but incredibly passionate, as all the people are that I met. But David is absolutely trying to bring these distilleries across Florida together and work together. They actually have a bottling called Florida Bastard or Florida Bastard, depending on when you're based in the UK. This is a blend of, this is off the top of my head, I think it's 8 different distilleries, possibly more, that have been blended together as a bottling, essentially a blending of majority of Florida whiskies. It hadn't yet been launched by the time I got there. However, I'm led to believe that I can actually bring some across. I want a bottle for myself. Well, I want 2. I want to keep one for posterity and I want to open one. The blend within it sounds absolutely amazing. There's some really, really interesting things going on in there. I didn't think I was going to be able to bring any across, but it sounds like I might. So if that's something of interest, then watch this space. So I am recording this at the end of October. I am just finalizing pricing and the logistics of bringing it across. But my intention is to have about a pallet's worth of stock come across as a testing the water, a couple from each brand and a couple of other bits and pieces from a couple of other distilleries that isn't in this box, that will be available to wholesalers and other retailers, not just through me, because I want people in the UK, across the UK, not just through me, to find out just how good this stuff is. I genuinely think this stuff is brilliant already. And as I say, they're still finding their feet. There is still potential to get even better, but this is such a good start. And to be honest, the pricing is very, very good. Even with, as I found out when we got home, literally the week after, thanks to our Prime Minister, who at the time of recording is now no longer our Prime Minister, the pound absolutely tanked, which is not what you want when you're in discussions with importing American products into the UK. But it seems like it might still work and we can still do stuff and it still keep a very reasonable pricing. So watch this space. Please do let me know your thoughts on these. Please do give me your feedback on these ones, because these are ones that, well, not the rye, but not the New Zealand, what am I about? Not the Zinfandel rye, but the 100% rye and also the bourbon I'll be coming across from Manifest. I'm looking at the high wheat rye, probably, so the cash strength, probably the 45%, also the Starkus, which I think is fascinating. There'll be the port finished bourbon and the straight bourbon from St. Augustine. Spirit of the Harvest, Dark Door. They also do something called Spirit of IPA, where they literally put IPA beer in a still and distill it. Add a little bit of whiskey in it just to kind of give it a bit more flavor profile. It tastes like an IPA beer, but it's 40%. It's absolutely amazing. The Callalisa Creek, the Sharp Bite Cinnamon Whiskey, with a view of bringing in this 90% rye a little bit later on when it's ready to be bottled, which was absolutely amazing. And then the Old St. Pete will be coming in, along with a couple of other bits and pieces, and also because I made friends with a liquor store in St. Petersburg who said that she might be able to sort me out some bottles at cost. Maybe some other American whiskies that you can't get in the UK that aren't going to be an absolutely ridiculous price, because I'm going to add them onto the pallet and it's going to cost me less to actually bring it over. So just keep an eye. Social media, get in touch, let me know what you think of these. I'd love to know your feedback. And now you can go on to trying these and getting all the background information. So like I say, if you're not doing it in a row, just click on the time at the bottom and that will send you straight to that particular background information, just so you've got some context as to the story behind each of these drams. And hopefully very soon, in a few weeks' time, you'll be able to buy these and others from me and from other retailers. And then hopefully that's the start of a fantastic relationship between the UK and Florida through me. Anyway, enjoy.
The St. Petersburg Distillery was founded in 2014 by Dominic Iafrate and his sons Dominic Jr. and Stephen. Dominic Sr.'s father Angelo was an Italian immigrant who came to the US in 1955 and eventually set up a successful construction company in Michigan before the family moved to Florida to create a recycling business that's become worth nearly $1 billion. Wanting to give something back to the state, the family looked at moving into the drinks industry, but after realising the craft brewing market was already oversaturated, realised that there were more opportunities in producing spirits, particularly in the Tampa and St. Petersburg region known as Cigar City. The distillery is one of the biggest spirits operations in Florida in terms of production, but also physical size. The family own a large piece of land that they plan to transform into a distillery district, enabling smaller distilling operations to work together in a central hub. The St. Petersburg Distillery produce a range of spirits with vodka, rum and a Florida orange liqueur also available. Old St. Pete whiskey used to be called somewhat confusingly a sweet corn whiskey, but is now replaced with sunshine whiskey. It's a blend of rye and corn spirit, 25% being 4-year-old whiskey finished with smoked oak chips and 75% being 7-year-old whiskey matured in virgin oak. It's bottled at 88 US proof or 44% ABV. The Sugarworks Distillery was founded in New Smyrna Beach on the east coast of Florida in early 2019 by Tom McPeak, a scientist who had previously worked in agriculture along with his wife Dana. With his scientific background, Tom is fascinated by yeast, grain types, and he even built his own column still. The distillery is named after the Kruger de Peister plantation and sugar works, which dates back to 1830. Ruins of the old mill can still be visited. New Smyrna Beach itself is the third oldest town in Florida. It's named after the ancient Greek city of Smyrna, which was the birthplace of the wife of Andrew Turnbull, a Scottish physician who colonised the area. The nearby Turnbull Bay, also the name of a range of runs from Sugarworks, is named after him. They also produce Shark Bite cinnamon whiskey, so named because NSB, New Smyrna Beach, is very popular with surfers and sharks are a risk. Naturally flavoured with cinnamon, red pepper and raw honey, it's much better balanced than Fireball and will hopefully be hitting these shores soon. Callalisa Creek is a popular fishing and paddle stream near to the distillery. The whiskey itself has a mash bill of 75% corn, 21% rye and 4% barley, which is aged for around 3.5 years in virgin oak. It's bottled at 80 US proof or 40% ABV. Founded in Tampa in late 2018 by Matthew Allen and Brandon Marshall, both who had experience in the hospitality industry, Dark Door Spirits is a more experimental distillery than most, playing around with flavour profiles and distilling techniques. Indeed, the team have a vacuum aging system from Avia Labs, a somewhat controversial tool for whiskey maturation, but it allows the team to maintain consistency from batch to batch, sometimes just being used as a finishing tool as opposed to being used for full aging. Spirit of IPA, which I hope to bring across the pond, is a fascinating experiment with actual IPA ale run through the stills on its own, with some rye whiskey being added before bottling. It tastes exactly the same as a standard IPA ale, just at 40% ABV, and it's absolutely brilliant. Spirit of Harvest, which is in the selection box, is described as a classic Pennsylvania-style rye whiskey, which is aged at least 1 day. The mash bill is 80% rye, 10% corn and 10% barley, with aging taking place in virgin oak barrels and bottling at 96 US proof or 48% ABV. The St. Augustine Distillery was founded by retired businessmen Phil McDaniel and Mike Diaz in 2011, who wanted to revitalise and give back to the region they were now living in. St. Augustine is the oldest continually occupied European settlement in America. Ground broke that year in the abandoned Florida Power and Light Ice Plant, which dates back to 1907, with distillation commencing in 2013. As leader of the newly formed Florida Craft Distillers Guild, McDaniel visited the Florida state capitol in 2012 to lobby for changes to legislation that dated back to Prohibition to allow distillers to offer direct sales to consumers in their tasting rooms. He was successful, although at the time this was limited to only 2 bottles per person per year. It took another 9 years to gradually increase that amount until limits were fully removed in late 2021, at which point distilleries were finally allowed to sell drinks by the glass in their tasting rooms and host consumer tasting events in other retail stores. The core bottling from St. Augustine is the straight bourbon, with a mash bill of 60% corn and 18% wheat, all sourced from Florida, along with 22% barley from outside the state, which is then aged for a minimum of 3 years in virgin oak. The port-finished bourbon, contained in your selection box, uses port wine sourced from the San Sebastian winery, which is located only 2 blocks away. It's bottled at 100.5 US proof or 51% ABV. In the northern Polish village of Jabłonka, Zbigniew Papa Kazuba started making family recipe cordials after retiring in 2005 from a career in biochemistry. As his cordials became more popular, he moved into spirits production along with his sons Matthias and Jacob, purchasing a copper pot still a few years later. In 2012, they started producing the first single malt whiskey to be made in the country, but Poland's heavily monopolised drinks industry limited their expansion plans. So in 2014, Papa and his sons moved to St. Petersburg, Florida, taking with them not only their stills, but also spirit resting in barrel. Indeed, the team recently released a 10-year-old rye, which spent the first 2 years of maturation in Poland before it was brought across to the US. Kazuba & Sons produce a wide range of spirits and cordials, including a fascinating new whiskey which I also hope to bring across to the UK. Starkus is a bottling based on a Polish tradition of birth, life and coming of age. When a baby was born, the child's father would pour a spirit into a barrel which would be sealed and buried. On that child's wedding day, the barrel would be unearthed and opened for the wedding guests to share and enjoy. Starkus is the Polish word for stork, a symbol of fertility. Starkus Light Whiskey is distilled at a higher proof than normal, which some would argue strips out flavour, but the end result is a whiskey that is more delicate in flavour but still hugely complex and bottled at 40% ABV without ever feeling watered down, and it makes a great introductory whiskey for new drinkers. The high wheat rye has a mash bill of 65% rye and 35% wheat. There is a 6-year-old release at 45% ABV, but the sample contained in the selection box is their cask-strength bottling aged for 7 years in virgin oak, one of the earliest spirits put into barrel after the move across the Atlantic. It's bottled at 108.8 US proof or 54.4% ABV. Manifest Distilling was founded in Jacksonville by David Cohen and 4 business partners in September 2016. The operation is fully certified organic. Every brand released is organic except for the potato vodka, as the potatoes are currently sourced from farms of which some use GMO products. Manifest produce a selection of gins, vodkas and whiskies, and their standard rye whiskey has a mash bill of 60% rye and 40% corn. However, there is also 100% rye bottling, which I hope to bring across. The Manifest Whiskey Project is a series of bottlings in conjunction with Blake Reiber of Sealbacks, sourcing whiskies from other distilleries to offer a bourbon or an experiment with blending. The latest release is number 4, and I hope to bring this across to the UK too. It's a sourced 4-year-old high rye bourbon blended with Manifest's own wheated rye. The mash bill for that is 60% rye, 40% wheat. That itself has been aged for a minimum of 2.5 years. Not only does the bottle look beautiful, the liquid itself is also utterly delicious. Manifest also on occasion release a series of small batch finished whiskies. Calvados, Zinfandel and Sweet Vermouth finished ryes are currently available, but in very limited quantities. So I'm delighted to give you the chance to try this phenomenal 2-year-old 100% rye finished in Californian Zinfandel red wine barrels for 7 months. It's bottled at 110.8 US proof or 55.4% ABV.